The audience filed into the El Capitan Theater expecting the kind of late night comfort they could enjoy half asleep. A few easy jokes about Los Angeles traffic, some teasing about British royalty, maybe a story about dogs or toddlers, and then a smooth sign-off before bedtime. But that night, the familiar formula unraveled. What they got instead was something taut, unpredictable, an interview that began like a comedy and slowly calcified into a duel between a host trying to keep the show afloat and a prince determined not to play along. Hollywood Boulevard buzzed outside like an electric hive. Inside, the band blasted out a bright, brassy riff while lights washed the stage in rich indigos and molten ambers. The whole room seemed tuned to laugh before the first punchline even landed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed, "please welcome your host, Jimmy Kimmel." The crowd erupted. Jimmy walked out in his signature dark suit, waving broadly, nodding at familiar faces, sliding effortlessly into the warmth of the moment. His monologue flowed the way only muscle memory can, jabs at politics, traffic, a scandal or two, each line landing with perfect timing. Then his tone shifted into mock solemnity. "Tonight," he said, "we have a very special guest. You may know him from the British royal family, a Netflix documentary about the British royal family, multiple interviews about the British royal family, a best-selling book about the British royal family, and of course, his side career as California's most publicly relocated citizen." The audience roared. Jimmy turned to the wings. "Please welcome Prince Harry." Music swelled. Applause rose. Prince Harry stepped into the light wearing a black suit, no tie, a crisp white shirt left open just enough to signal he was relaxed, but not too relaxed. His beard was trimmed, his hair casually tousled in a way clearly meant to look effortless. Cameras followed him like obedient satellites. He offered a small wave, polite, reserved, almost reluctant, and crossed to Jimmy's desk. The smile on his face flickered like a bulb not fully screwed in. Jimmy stood. "Good to see you," he said with genuine warmth. Harry shook his hand briefly.
"Yeah," he replied.
"Sure." It was such a clipped, lukewarm greeting that the audience wasn't sure how to react, so they clapped louder to fill the space. Harry sat back in the guest chair, ankle balanced over his knee, a posture of casual ease that somehow looked defensive. Jimmy sat opposite him, shuffling cards. So Jimmy began, "How's Los Angeles treating you?" Harry shrugged. "It's fine. Weather's better than London. People are slightly less nosy." Then he cast a pointed look at Jimmy's desk. "Depending where you sit." A ripple of uncertain laughter broke through. Jimmy chuckled, keeping it light. "Well, you are on a talk show. If you wanted privacy, there's a very quiet Ayeshpa down the road." The audience laughed again, relieved to have something clearly safe to laugh at. Harry smirked, his first sign of amusement, though brief. "Yeah, well, I'm used to people pretending they want to talk when they really just want a headline." Jimmy opened his mouth, then closed it. The comment hung in the air like smoke. He let his smile do the heavy lifting and moved on. "You've been in California for a while now?" Jimmy said. "Netflix, book deals, Oprah. How's Malibu life treating you compared to Windsor?" Harry inhaled slowly. "Less cold? Emotionally or weather-wise?" Jimmy quipped. Harry turned his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Both," he said plainly. Some in the crowd laughed too loudly, unsure if they were supposed to. Jimmy nodded. "Proper American now. Yell at other drivers. Complain when Starbucks runs out of oat milk." Harry smirked again. "I've seen worse crowds outside palaces than outside Starbucks. At least those people don't pretend to like you." The laughter this time was thinner, fragile around the edges. A small crack had opened in the atmosphere. Jimmy kept steady. "You don't think Starbucks baristas like you?" "I don't really care if they do," Harry said. "That's kind of the point." "The point of coffee?" Jimmy asked. "The point of being here. I'm not trying to make people like me anymore. That was Britain's job." There it was, the moment the room shifted. Jimmy felt it, the audience felt it. Even Harry seemed to lean into it. "Well," Jimmy said carefully, "you did bring some of that job with you. Netflix interviews, a best-selling book. People seem very interested in your dislike of people being interested in you." That landed. The audience laughed harder, real laughter this time, grateful for the release. Harry's jaw tightened. Or maybe people are interested because nobody else was honest enough to say it. Jimmy sensed the tension rising like a tide. He flipped to a new card. "All right," he said gently. "Something lighter. How are the kids? We see photos sometimes. Are they happy here? Do they like California life?" Harry glanced at the audience, then back at him. "They're kids," he said flatly. "They're not doing press." A sharp, startled laugh burst from a corner of the room. Jimmy lifted an eyebrow. I wasn't asking for a press conference. Just if they're happy. Harry's expression cooled.
Yeah, they're fine. Happy.
Whatever word makes it least marketable for you. For the first time, Jimmy's smile faltered at the eyes. I'm not trying to market your children, he said quietly, the warmth slipping just a little. I'm just asking about your family. Jimmy said it lightly, palms open, voice softening in an attempt to ease the crackling tension that had settled over the theater like static. But Harry only shrugged again, a slow, loose motion that bordered on dismissive. Everyone always says that before they sell the story, he replied. This time, the audience didn't laugh. A cough echoed somewhere in the upper rows. One of the band members shifted his weight, adjusting the guitar strap across his shoulder. Even though he wasn't about to play, the atmosphere thickened. Jimmy tapped the edge of his cue card against the desk once, twice, before shifting gears with a practiced smile. Okay, he said carefully. So you're protective, I get that. Let's talk about something you have chosen to put out there. He lifted his next card. Your book. A mixture of groans and applause rolled through the room, the audience unsure whether to be supportive or amused. Jimmy flashed his trademark grin. Ah yes, that little paperback therapy session you released. That landed hard. The crowd erupted in laughter. But Harry didn't, his expression barely twitched. He stared at Jimmy with an intensity that drained the humor out of the moment. You read it? Harry asked. Jimmy hesitated, not long, but long enough. I read parts of it, he admitted. It's long, I have a show and kids and, a life. The audience laughed again. Harry didn't. Right, he said, voice cooling. So you didn't read it, but you talk about it. Jimmy lifted a brow and spread his hands. We're in Hollywood. That's practically the job description. A few people whooped in agreement. Harry responded with a slow, sarcastic clap, quiet but intentionally insulting. Impressive, he said. Commentary without context. You do great in the British press. The temperature in the room dropped a degree. Laughter thinned. A ripple of discomfort moved across the front rows. Jimmy inhaled slowly, keeping his tone breezy though a thread of irritation tugged beneath it. Okay, he said. Let's go there then. The British press. You've talked a lot about them. You've had a complicated relationship. Is there any part of you that misses the old life, the structure, the security, the castles? Harry let out a single chuckle, but it was hollow, humorless. I missed the parts that weren't rotten, he said. Unfortunately, those were outnumbered. And your family? Jimmy asked gently. Do you miss them? Harry's eyes hardened instantly, like shutters slamming closed. You sound like every interviewer desperate for a redemption arc, he said. It's not going to happen just because it makes good ratings. The room went still. Murmurs replaced laughter. A woman in the audience leaned forward in her seat, uneasy. Jimmy raised a calming hand. I'm not looking for a redemption arc, he said. I'm just asking, do you miss your brother, your father? Harry's smile was a thin, cold blade. I miss people who acted like family, he replied. I don't miss institutions with better PR than conscience. A low, collective ulu rolled across the crowd. Do you think there's a path back? Not to the institution, just to the people. Harry's jaw clenched. Everyone loves that question, he said. It keeps the fantasy alive that I'll go back, say sorry, pose for a Christmas photo, and you all get your little fairy tale ending. It's boring. The word landed like a slap, dismissing not just the question but the audience itself. Several people shifted in their seats. A stagehand froze near the curtain. Jimmy cleared his throat, recalibrating. All right, he said slowly. So, no fairy tale. Then what do you want people to take away from everything you've said? The interviews, the book, this conversation tonight. Harry answered without hesitation. That I'm done performing for them. The irony was so sharp the room practically flinched. People exchanged glances. On stage, Jimmy sat straighter, the performer's smile slipping into something more measured. You do realize you're on national television, he said quietly. This is still a performance. Harry met his gaze unblinking. No, this is me tolerating questions long enough to remind people I don't owe them anything. From the control room came a faint, exasperated, "Oh, come on." The band members glanced at each other. Even the cameras seemed to hover more cautiously. Jimmy took a slow breath and shifted back into showman mode by force of habit. Well, he said brightly, we're off to a cheerful start, aren't we? The audience laughed on command, but the sound was uneasy, like laughter in a room where something might break. Everyone could feel it now. Harry wasn't just being edgy, he was simmering. And Jimmy, though composed, was beginning to fray around the edges. Whatever interview this was becoming, It wasn't the one anyone rehearsed. The applause sign blinked mechanically. The audience clapped louder than they felt. Jimmy smiled through it, but his eyes never left Harry. "So," he said, flipping to a new card, "let's talk about someone who, for reasons I don't fully understand, people are even more obsessed with than you. A beat. Vegan." The crowd reacted at once. Cheers, murmurs, a few muted boos swallowed by noise. Harry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh good," he said dryly. "We've reached the part where you pretend you didn't book me just to say her name into a microphone." The tension snapped like a wire. Jimmy forced a smile. "I mean, I'd like to think you're interesting on your own. But I also like ratings. So let's split the difference." Laughter uneasy again.
Harry didn't join it.
"She's my wife," he said. "Not a segment." Jimmy nodded. "Absolutely. That's why I'm asking about your real life, not your PR reel. How is she? How's life together here? Half royalty, half Netflix brand." Harry leaned back, suit stretching with emotion, smile tightening. "She's fine," he said. "We're fine. America loves us. Isn't that the headline you want?" Jimmy exhaled through his nose. "I was hoping for a little more than fine, maybe a story." A moment. Jimmy leaned forward slightly, voice softer now, as if coaxing rather than interrogating. Harry tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny?" he said. "I did the emotional exposure thing. Wrote a book, sat through countless interviews, cried about trauma on camera, and everyone called me weak or manipulative. And now you want another moment." He gestured vaguely toward the audience. "Sorry. I'm fresh out of emotional content for people who rated out of 10. The line drew a mixture of laughs and uneasy winces. Somewhere in the back, a cough cracked the silence. Jimmy studied him for a beat, eyes narrowing thoughtfully, before responding with his practiced late-night cadence. "Okay," he said slowly. "So the emotional pantry is closed." "Very," Harry confirmed, shrugging almost lazily. Still, Jimmy pressed on. That calm, conversational tone, the kind that makes confrontation feel like banter, was his armor. "You live a life people are curious about," he said. "Little kids growing up in America. A marriage constantly under the spotlight. A life split between continents, between two identities. That's not nothing." Harry shrugged again. "People are curious because they're bored," he replied. "I don't have to feed that." "But you do," Jimmy said calmly, leaning forward. "Every deal you've signed feeds curiosity." The audience hummed, catching the sharp truth in that line. Harry's eyes hardened, just for a moment. "You say that like I don't get anything out of it," he said. "I do. I get control." Jimmy raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" he asked. "Because this doesn't look very controlled." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Harry's expression flattened. "Cute," he said. "Late night jab, good for the monologue." Jimmy let out a small, measured sigh, still smiling as he shifted topics. "You mentioned people expecting a fairy tale," he said. "Let me ask something maybe simpler, just marriage. Is it easier here, being a husband in America, than being a prince in the UK?" Harry's gaze flickered, like a window caught by the sun before the wall went back up. "It's easier being a human," he said finally. "When people stop demanding I play a role for their nostalgia." "So yes," Jimmy nodded. "Had as a father." Harry's shoulders tensed visibly. "I'm a good father," he said sharply. Jimmy held up both hands. "I didn't say you weren't," he replied gently. "I asked what it's like." "It's private?" Harry snapped. "That's what it's like." The audience quieted again. Jimmy's smile thinned, but he pressed on. "For someone who's done multiple public sit-downs, a global documentary, and a memoir, you're suddenly very allergic to questions." "I'm allergic to interrogation disguised as interest," Harry countered. Jimmy studied him steadily. "Do you think anyone can ask you anything now without you seeing it as an attack?" Harry didn't answer immediately. His jaw clenched, muscles shifting under the stage lights. "Depends who's asking," he said finally. Jimmy nodded slowly. "Okay, let's say I'm asking as someone who's also a father, also in the public eye, not just a host. Do you ever worry that your kids will grow up feeling like they were raised inside a project rather than a family?" The question landed with gravity. The band froze mid-note. The audience held its breath. Harry's eyes chilled. "My kids," he said, voice low, "will have the privilege of knowing I did everything I could to protect them from a toxic machine. If you want to twist that into a project, that's your narrative. Not mine." Jimmy absorbed that, nodding. "Fair enough," he said. "But they'll also grow up seeing their parents' lives on screens. Your pain, your anger, family fights. That's part of the deal. You put it out there." Harry leaned forward, posture rigid now, relaxed demeanor gone. "I put out what was necessary," he said. You don't get to decide what that cost was? Jimmy's eyes sharpened. Let's talk about cost, he said quietly.
Not just yours.
Your family's. He flipped to a card without looking down. Your mother? A collective intake of breath rose from the audience. Small tentative held. Jimmy continued. You've spoken about her a lot. The press, the institution. Do you ever worry you've become addicted to fighting ghosts no one else is chasing? For the first time, Harry's expression shifted. Genuine offense. That's disgusting, he said. Jimmy didn't flinch. It's a question. You've said again and again how Diana's story shaped you, how much you hate seeing history repeat. But sometimes doesn't holding on become its own trap? Harry's voice dropped. My mother died because people wouldn't leave her alone. If you think for a second I'm going to let go so the same people can rewrite her memory, you're wrong. Jimmy cut in gently. I'm not asking you to forget her. I'm asking if you know how to live without constantly weaponizing what happened to her. The word hit like a physical slap. Harry stared, breathing quickening. You have no right to talk about my mother like that, he said. You never knew her. You only know the headlines. Jimmy's voice softened. You're right. I didn't know her. I only know what she meant to people watching this, to people who loved her because she seemed human in a world that wasn't. Harry's nostrils flared. And now you want to turn her into a segment too, he said bitterly. Of course you do. Jimmy shook his head. No, he said quietly. I want to understand the man sitting in front of me, who's still bleeding every time her name comes up. For a brief second, Harry's eyes betrayed something raw and unguarded, a glimpse of the grief, the fury, and the humanity buried beneath the public persona. Then it snapped shut again, the fragile thread of openness vanishing like smoke. What replaced it was colder, sharper, a blade of disdain cutting the room. What you want? Harry said slowly, eyes scanning the audience as a moment. A clip, a viral tear. I'm not giving it to you. Jimmy's shoulders sank ever so slightly. His voice softened, carefully measured. I wasn't asking you to cry. I was asking for honesty, without attacking everyone in the room. A murmur rippled through the audience, small but noticeable. Harry heard it, his gaze sharpened, jaw tightening. Right, he said, because heaven forbid a royal actually have boundaries. Jimmy let a sad smile touch his lips. Boundaries are one thing, he said. Contempt is another. No laughter followed, only silence, thick and uneasy. Harry leaned forward slightly, irritation now clear in the tight set of his shoulders. You invited me here, he said. You knew what you were getting. Jimmy nodded once. You're right, he said. I did. He glanced briefly at the camera, then back at Harry. But I also thought you might still be capable of a conversation that wasn't just, proving how far above all of this you think you are. The studio felt smaller somehow, denser, charged with an invisible weight. Harry's reply was soft, deliberate, but edged with steel. Maybe, he said, I'm just finally done pretending this circus deserves respect. Somewhere in the control room, a producer muttered a curse under their breath. Everyone in the room could see it. This wasn't going to burn out quietly. It was building to something that might break. Jimmy Kimmel, seated behind his desk with a stack of cards, was about to decide how far he would let it go. The band's soft transition music faded, awkward and tentative, as the camera cut to a tighter shot of the desk. Jimmy shuffled the cards, set them down deliberately, and looked at Harry with a measured, careful gaze. All right, Jimmy said, voice almost surgical. Let's talk about something you've managed to keep at arm's length tonight, your brother. A quiet wave ran through the audience. Some leaned forward instinctively. William, Jimmy continued gently. People still talk about the two of you like you're frozen in time, walking behind that coffin. Do you ever speak now, off camera, off statements? Harry's face hardened immediately. Why are you obsessed with dragging personal wounds into public entertainment? He asked, sharp and cold. Jimmy didn't rise to the bait. I'm asking because millions of people grew up watching you as a pair, he said. They wonder what happened. Harry let out a short, humorless laugh and he echoed, bitterly. We grew up. Some people just did it more honestly than others. A murmur ran through the audience again, soft but uneasy. Do you miss him? He asked quietly. Harry's gaze snapped back to him, eyes sharp, unblinking. I miss the idea of a brother, he said, not the institutionally approved version of one. That's evasive. Jimmy countered gently. It's precise. Harry shot back. You're just not hearing what you want. Jimmy inhaled, steadying himself. Do you believe reconciliation is impossible? Harry leaned back, crossing his arms. I believe some bridges were made of glass, he said, And people keep acting surprised when they shatter. Jimmy studied him for a long beat, then asked softly, "And your father?" The room tensed. Harry's lips pressed together. For a moment it seemed he might refuse to answer. Then he spoke slowly, deliberately. "My father made his choices. So did I. That's all you're willing to say?" Jimmy pressed. "That's all that's owed to strangers." The word strangers drew an audible reaction from the audience. Jimmy's jaw tightened slightly, voice calm but firmer now. "You're here because people care," he said. "Because they followed your life from the moment you were born. They don't see themselves as strangers." Harry scoffed. "That's the problem," he said. "They think proximity through a screen equals entitlement." Jimmy let him speak, nodding. Harry's voice gained intensity. "You talk about empathy, about understanding. But the public never had to live under 24-hour scrutiny. They never had to learn how to smile while bleeding." Jimmy acknowledged the point. "Fair, but some would argue you now live off the very scrutiny you despise." Harry leaned forward abruptly, voice hardening. "You keep repeating that like it's some great revelation," he said. "Yes, I profit from telling my story. That doesn't make the story untrue." "No," Jimmy replied. "It makes it complicated." Harry smirked, a thin cutting line. "Life's complicated. You should try it sometime." A collective intake of breath swept through the audience. That one was unmistakably insulting. Jimmy exhaled slowly through his nose. "I'm trying right now," he said, sitting across from someone who seems determined to turn every question into a personal attack. "Because every question is an attack." Harry shot back. Jimmy said, "To you, maybe. You've never had your childhood sold by tabloids." Jimmy paused, voice softening. "I've had my mistakes replayed on loop too. Different scale, same exposure." Harry laughed sharply. "You're a comedian who chose fame," he said. "I was born into it." The audience reacted with a mix of murmurs and a few scattered boos. Harry noticed. "So now they're turning on me too," he muttered. "Predictable." Jimmy glanced toward the crowd, then back to Harry. "It's not about turning on you. It's about how you're speaking to everyone right now." There's a tone of exhaustion. Harry cut in, voice low, sharp. "Of someone who's tired of being dissected by people who don't listen." Jimmy's voice sharpened slightly. "You're not exactly making it easy to listen." Harry's eyes flashed. "Because I'm not here to be liked," Harry said, voice low, controlled, yet cutting through the hum of the studio. "I'm here because your producers needed a headline." Jimmy shook his head slowly, leaning forward just slightly. "We invited you because you're still one of the most fascinating public figures on the planet," he said evenly. "Not because we wanted a meltdown." Harry stared, eyes narrowed, a flicker of incredulity crossing his face. "Then why keep poking?" he asked. "Because you came on a talk show?" Jimmy replied, his tone measured, neutral, almost gentle. "And that's literally what happens." The audience laughed nervously, but Harry didn't. Jimmy shifted gears, bringing the conversation back to neutral ground, his late night cadence returning. "Let's talk about you outside the family for a moment," he said. "Since leaving the royal role, how do you see your career now? What do you actually want to do?" Harry hesitated, shoulders lifting slightly in a shrug. "I don't need a career defined by approval anymore," he said finally. "I do advocacy. I do projects that matter to me. Some would call them media projects." Jimmy noted carefully. Harry's jaw tightened. "Everything is media now," he snapped, voice sharper. "Even this conversation." Jimmy inclined his head, acknowledging the point. "True, but not everything is hostile." Harry's smile was thin, tight. "You've been chipping away at my family for 20 minutes. Let's not pretend this is friendly." Jimmy straightened in his seat. "I've been asking the questions millions of viewers would ask if they were sitting here," he replied evenly. "You're the one turning them into battlegrounds." Harry's tone dropped into something colder, more precise. "Because the battlefield followed me into this chair." The audience shifted uncomfortably. A few in the front rows exchanged uneasy glances. Jimmy studied Harry's face, the tight jaw, the restless posture, the exhaustion now curdling into something sharper, almost arrogance. "You know," Jimmy said quietly, "at some point pain stops excusing behavior and starts shaping it." Harry scoffed, the motion quick, dismissive. "So now you're my therapist too." "I'm your host," Jimmy replied evenly. "And right now you're making it very difficult for this to remain a show." Harry leaned in, eyes hard, the stage lights catching the lines of his face. "Then stop asking questions you don't want the answers to," he said sharply. Jimmy held his gaze for a long moment. "I'm asking questions because that's my job," he said evenly. "You're answering like someone who came in already angry." Harry exhaled sharply, a brief concession slipping through. Maybe I was, he admitted. The admission landed strangely raw, fleeting, buried immediately beneath a mask of bravado. But that doesn't mean you get to push, he added. And it doesn't mean you get to disrespect the room. Jimmy replied, voice firm but controlled. The audience murmured in agreement, louder this time. Harry glanced around, awareness flickering that the balance was tipping. He smiled tightly, almost mockingly. He said, there it is. The crowd turns, the host stiffens, and suddenly I'm the villain again. No, Jimmy said, voice calm, deliberate. Right now, you're a guest who's burning through goodwill very quickly. Harry's expression hardened. Goodwill is overrated, he said flatly. Honesty isn't. Honesty without respect, he said quietly, just sounds like contempt. Silence fell, heavy, almost physical. Harry leaned back, arms crossed, defiance clear in every line of his posture. The audience felt it, tension coiling in the room like a living thing. Somewhere in the control room, a producer whispered, we're losing him. Jimmy straightened, the playful late-night charm replaced by something firm, deliberate. Let me ask one final question, he said, measured. Not as a comedian, not as a critic, just as a human being. Harry didn't respond. He stared ahead, jaw tight. You carry a lot of anger, Jimmy continued quietly. At your family, at the press, at the world. Do you ever worry that one day your kids will grow up and inherit that anger too? That did it. Harry's eyes snapped to Jimmy, furious, sharp. Don't you dare drag my children into your little psychological experiment, he snapped. You've already mined my mother for decades. You're not doing that with my kids. Jimmy lifted a hand slowly, carefully. I wasn't attacking you. I was asking you to look forward instead of backward. Harry laughed bitterly, voice cutting. Easy for you to say. You didn't grow up with your grief sold to the highest bidder. Jimmy's tone softened. No, but I do know that living in permanent battle mode eventually destroys the person holding the sword. Harry stood abruptly. The chairs scraped against the floor, making the audience gasp. You've been provoking me all night, he said coldly. You wanted this moment? Congratulations. Jimmy stood as well, calm, measured. No, he said evenly. I wanted a conversation. What I got was hostility, contempt, and a refusal to treat anyone in this room with basic respect. Harry stepped closer to the desk, eyes flashing. You invited a prince, he said. Jimmy met his gaze firm. No, he said. We invited a guest, and a guest does not insult the host, the audience, and the show itself, and expect to stay. Harry scoffed, incredulous. So you're silencing me now? Jimmy shook his head. I'm ending this, he said firmly. Because this program cannot continue like this. Harry stared, disbelief etched across his face. You're kicking me off your show. Yes, Jimmy replied, calm, final. The audience erupted, a mixture of shock, applause, and murmurs. The band froze, unsure of what to play. You've crossed the line repeatedly tonight, Jimmy said. I won't let this turn into a spectacle of disrespect. Harry grabbed his jacket from the chair, mockingly bowing to the crowd. Enjoy your moral high ground, he said bitterly. You'll need it for the headlines. Jimmy nodded once. I'll take that over losing control of my studio. Harry turned toward the audience, giving a short, bitter bow. There you go, he said. America at its finest. Boos mixed with applause as he walked off, disappearing behind the curtains. Jimmy remained at his desk, breathing slowly, regaining composure. Well, he said quietly to the camera, that was not what we planned. The audience laughed nervously. We'll be right back, Jimmy added. After the briefest commercial break, the music hit. The camera faded out, leaving viewers with a tension that had not yet resolved, a confrontation they would be talking about long after the credits rolled.